It's good to see you today. It is March 17th. Our reading comes from the book of Deuteronomy. We are still there in Deuteronomy chapter 16, and we're going to be actually looking at a few chapters today. Our daily reading is, we left off yesterday in Deuteronomy 16 looking at the three main feast days, the Passover, the Feast of Weeks, aka Pentecost, and the Feast of Booths. And then we come to verse 18 is where our reading today begins. And we have a short paragraph about justice. You shall appoint judges. And of course, that's what they were commanded to do. And to just, again, go through, look at our passages quickly. Forbidden forms of worship. You shall not plant for yourself any tree. What image that tree is tied in with. He's not just against trees. It's talking about idolatry. All right, chapter 17 now, where it's talking about laws concerning sacrifice, not to offer anything that has any blemish, defect, things like that. Then we have legal decisions by priests and judges, where it talks about basically because you have these judges that are going to be appointed, but then if there was something that was too difficult for them to work it out, it would sort of move up the chain, if you will, and they would come to the priests, the Levites, and judgments would be made there. And people had to abide by those judgments. Then we have the laws concerning Israel's kings. We're going to come back and we're going to look at this because you may be thinking, oh, wait a minute. He just said, no, appoint judges. And that's kind of an interesting thing. Okay, chapter 18, now we have the provision for the priests and the Levites that was given. We've spoken about some of these things before, seen them in other places. Then we have abominable practices, namely if someone was practicing witchcraft or if someone was practicing child sacrifice, which did happen with Molech or others, they were supposed to deal with that in the way the Lord told them. And then you have this new prophet like Moses. This is messianic, and this is actually referenced in the New Testament. But that is one of the prophecies about Jesus. Now come on to chapter 19. And let's see, we still have a ways to go. We're going through chapter 21 today. We have the laws concerning the cities of refuge. I believe we've spoken about that before. Property boundaries, don't remove your neighbor's landmark. Laws concerning witnesses. I did think this one was interesting. Notice, if a false witness arises, let's see, one witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity by the mouth of two or three witnesses. That, by the way, is also New Testament policy, that by the mouth of two or three witnesses the matter shall be established. But notice, if a false witness rise against any man to testify, both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges shall make careful inquiry, and indeed, if the witness is a false witness who has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother, so you shall put away the evil from among you. I just think it's interesting that in these matters, if someone was found to be making false accusations, you were supposed to deal with the person making false accusations as they wanted to do to the one they were falsely accusing. I think that's an interesting principle. Chapter 20, the laws concerning warfare. I thought this was interesting too. I think all these chapters are interesting because I think Scripture is interesting. But this one, the laws concerning warfare, where they are actually told, look at verse 5. Okay, have you built a new house and not dedicated it? Guess what? Right? These are the laws concerning warfare. If you've built a new house, not dedicated it, you go home, lest you die in battle and it becomes someone else's property, I guess, and another man dedicated. Have you planted a vineyard, but you haven't partaken of the vineyard yet? Go home, right? And enjoy the fruits of your labor. Are you betrothed to a woman and not married her yet? Go home and enjoy the wife of your youth. We don't want you, I think it's lovely that those provisions, that the Lord made those provisions in the laws about going to war. When it was, in the springtime and it was time to go to war, these provisions were made and implemented. When they would go near a city, if a city accepted their offer of peace, they would be placed under tribute. If not, they were going to besiege it, and when the Lord delivered it into their hands, they would have to they would have to they would have to fight. I thought even here, it's just amazing the details that are put in here. When you besiege a city, verse 19, for a long time, while making war against it to take it, you shall not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. If you can eat of them, do not cut them down to use in the siege, for the tree of the field is man's food. Only the trees which you know are not trees for food, you may destroy and cut down to build siege works against the city. It just amazes me, the details that are given. Chapter 21 now. Atonement for unsolved murders. And again, I just think it's cool. If you find someone slain lying in a field in the land, so someone's been killed, they're out in the middle of nowhere. What you're going to do, the elders and the judges are going to measure the distance from the slain man to the surrounding cities. And whatever city is closest, they're going to go and they're going to make atonement for this unsolved murder. They're going to say, we don't know, our hands have not shed this blood, we have not seen this happening, we don't know who did this, it's not our fault, but we're still going to make atonement for it. I just think it's interesting. Just amazing, the details that are being given. Okay, let's come back. Chapter 17. That took a little longer than usual, just because there were more chapters than usual. But back in chapter 17 at verse 14. When you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. And boy, doesn't this sound familiar. You shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses, one from among your own brethren you shall set as king over you. You may not set a foreign over you who is not your brother. You know why it's interesting? Because in the account of Samuel, what do they say? We want to be like all the other nations. Set a king over us. And God says they're rejecting me. Well, to look at this chapter, and let me get it back up there. The Lord knew they were going to do this. And let's say this, to look at it, the Lord knew they were going to do this. This is prophesied. And my question is this a prophecy? Or was it necessarily wrong to have a king? I mean, David, the man after God's own heart, God chose him to be king. I'll just let you, it's just an interesting thought to consider. But the Lord knew what they were going to do, obviously. But here we have provisions made, or stipulations, I guess I should say. Okay, you want to set a king over you, and just look at it. Verse 16. Okay, it's got to be someone native, but he shall not multiply horses for himself. He shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. You're not going to multiply horses for yourself. Why? For one thing, he says, nor shall you return to Egypt. There's different ways to return to Egypt. One way is to go back to Egypt. Another way is to invite Egypt to come to you. And you want to guess who's Solomon when it talks about one of his first wives? It was the daughter, I believe, of the Pharaoh of Egypt. There's different ways to be influenced by Egypt. One way is to go back. One way is to invite them to come up. But you don't multiply horses. Why not? To think about it. Because it's going to cause you to trust in your own might. You think, oh, look at my army. And you think you're going to stand by that. All of these things you just imagine Solomon. And how long, as Solomon did enjoy peace. And I would suggest Solomon enjoyed peace because it's more about God's grace. And perhaps even more about David. But anyway, but Solomon did enjoy peace. And how long did it last after he was gone? The kingdom was divided in his son's lifetime. That's how long it lasted. You multiply horses, don't multiply horses. You're going to trust in your might. You want to be like all the other nations. You're going to set a king over you. Okay, this is how you need to do it. Don't trust in your own might. The second one, to look back at it. And actually, yeah, verse 17. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. And of course, we know what happened with Solomon, with Solomon's life. So don't multiply wives. And also, do not, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. I think what's said about Solomon is that those things were so common that silver was like gravel. It was just absolute prosperity. Well, why not multiply silver and gold? Because you're going to trust in riches. You're going to trust in riches. You're going to trust in your own might. You're going to be living it up with your 700 wives and your 300 concubines. Your heart's going to turn away from God, and everything's going to blow apart. And then whose are all those things going to be? Somebody else's. That's how this is basically going to transpire. Okay, well, what should the king do then? Also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law in a book. He should turn into a scribe, and he should write. He should copy himself. He should copy for himself the law from the copy that the priests and the Levites have, from the book that they have. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes. I wonder if part of this, sometimes people will, what's the word I'm looking for? We retain more if we write it ourselves. And that sometimes, in school, you have a copy of the notes, but you make your own copy. You write your own copy because you retain it more. And I wonder if part of that is what this is, that the king shall write for himself a copy, and it will be with him, and he will read it, and he needs to learn to fear the Lord his God, and he needs to be careful to observe all the words of this law. The Lord knew what was going to happen. The Lord knew they were going to want to have a king and be like all the nations that are around them. But the Lord did not want their king to be like all the other kings. But sadly, that is what happened. I hope this study has been helpful for you today. It is interesting. At least I think so, just because it's in Deuteronomy. And it's long before King Saul, or David, or Solomon, or Rehoboam, or any of the other kings. Long before. But the law about kings is being given. Would they keep it? We know the answer to that. Appreciate you. Appreciate you studying along with us. Hope everything is going well for you. Hope you join us for our next study in God's Word.